Imagine it's the dead of winter 1911, and four men are trudging across northern Canada's frozen wilderness, armed with little more than determination and dog sleds. Their mission? To cross nearly 500 miles of the Yukon's harshest, most desolate terrain to deliver critical communications. Somewhere along this journey, things go horrifyingly wrong, leaving these men stranded and struggling to survive. This is the story of the Lost Arctic Patrol. Prepare yourself. This isn't just a tale of exploration. It's a lesson in what can happen when we test the limits of human endurance. Chapter 1. Into the Yukon Wilderness. Canada's Yukon Territory is a land of extremes. Vast, untouched, and unforgiving, it borders Alaska, but far surpasses it in isolation. Even today, the Yukon is one of the most sparsely populated places on Earth, with a population density of just 0.18 people per square mile. To live here is to face temperatures that can plunge to minus 63 degrees Fahrenheit, or minus 63 Celsius, as recorded in the village of Snag. And as if the cold wasn't enough, the region is filled with impassable glaciers, wild rivers, and endless forests, territory that can be brutal to even the most experienced travelers. For the indigenous communities of the Yukon, these lands were navigable, but for outsiders, the Yukon was an unforgiving frontier. It was here that the Royal Northwest Mounted Police undertook annual patrols, a perilous journey through 475 miles of wilderness to deliver mail between Dawson City and Fort McPherson. And in 1910, 41-year-old Inspector Francis Fitzgerald was tasked with leading this expedition. Fitzgerald was no stranger to harsh conditions, having spent 6 years in isolation on Canada's northern coast. Accompanying him were Constables Sam Carter, Richard O'Hara Taylor, and George Francis Kinney. They began their trek on December 21st, expecting to reach Dawson City by mid-January. But what began as a routine mission would soon unravel into a nightmare. Chapter 2. The First Signs of Trouble. Just days into the journey, the team encountered heavy snowfall and extreme temperatures. At first, they made good progress, but an early navigation error would set off a chain of catastrophic events. The team's guide, Sam Carter, was trusted to lead them through the Yukon. But in reality, he had only traveled this route once, and it was years earlier, in the opposite direction. When the team missed a critical crossing over the Peel River, it became painfully clear they were lost in the endless snow and ice of the Yukon. Each step seemed to take them further into uncertainty, and desperation set in. Seeking help, Fitzgerald enlisted a local native guide, Esau George, whose knowledge of the land was unmatched. With Esau's guidance, the team was able to regain their path, following the trails he carved with precision through dense snowdrifts and rugged terrain. But after only a few days, in a moment of overconfidence, Fitzgerald decided to release Esau, believing they could manage on their own. The decision would prove disastrous. Without Esau's expert navigation, the group soon found themselves once again adrift in the frozen wilderness, each mile further from safety. As they pressed forward without Esau, the group found themselves battling through blizzards, temperatures that dropped to minus 51 degrees Fahrenheit and miles of unbroken snow. Their supplies were dwindling faster than anticipated, and the deeper they ventured, the more isolated they became. But Fitzgerald refused to turn back, and they continued to push south in the hopes of finding their way back to Dawson City. Chapter 3. Lost and Running Out of Time. After nearly a month on the trail, Fitzgerald's men were starving. With only 10 pounds of flour, 8 pounds of bacon, and a few pounds of dried fish left, they faced a grim decision. They began sacrificing their sled dogs for meat, one by one, to stave off hunger. Starvation was only part of the horror they endured. Soon, scurvy, a vicious illness caused by a lack of vitamin C, crept into their bodies, making each day an agony. Scurvy didn't just sap their strength, it attacked them from the inside out, leading to swollen, bleeding gums, painful joint stiffness, and deep exhaustion that left them struggling for breath. Even minor wounds wouldn't heal, and their bodies seemed to weaken by the hour. In this state, the The once strong men were now reduced to staggering through waist-deep snow. Their faces are cracked and chapped by the wind and cold. Their fingers, raw and numb, could barely grip the sleds. Day by day, the punishing Yukon winter dug deep in what remained of their strength, while the supplies that had once promised safety dwindled. With every mile, hope grew more distant. By the end of January, the situation was dire. Fitzgerald's journal entries, once optimistic, turned bleak. He recorded that he had lost all hope as the snow kept falling and temperatures remained unbearable. With each passing day, they were losing the fight against nature. Chapter 4. The Rescue That Came Too Late. Back in Dawson City, there was little concern when the patrol didn't arrive on schedule. Delays were common in the harsh winter months. But when Esau George arrived in Dawson in mid-February and inquired about the patrol's whereabouts, alarm bells finally rang. A relief party was formed, and they set off to find Fitzgerald's team. The rescuers faced the same brutal conditions, but they pushed on, hoping to catch up with the stranded men before it was too late. On March 21st, the relief party discovered a tragic scene. At a desolate campsite, they found George Kinney and Richard Taylor lying motionless by a burned-out fire, their bodies showing signs of extreme starvation. A short distance from the campsite, the relief team came across the body of Sam Carter, lying in a scene that conveyed both the agony and dignity of his final moments. His body was carefully positioned, his hands crossed over his chest, and his face covered with a handkerchief. A small, haunting gesture that seemed to speak of deep respect. It was clear that even in their last hours, the team held onto a shred of humanity, honoring each other despite the crushing despair. And then, just a few hundred yards from Sam, they found Inspector Francis Fitzgerald, the leader of the patrol, whose frostbitten hands still clutched his journal, a silent testament to the mental fortitude he maintained through their ordeal. His last entries revealed the harrowing truth of those final days, details of failed attempts to find food, the gradual weakening of each man, and the desperate sacrifices they had made to cling to life. Fitzgerald, who had so often inspired those around him with his resilience, had held on until the end, even arranging Sam's body with reverence before lying down himself, exhausted and alone. The rescuers learned from the journal that, even in their weakened state, the patrol had continued marching with a faint hope of survival, unaware of just how close they had come to safety. At only 25 miles from Fort McPherson, they were within reach of rescue, but the relentless cold, starvation, and unyielding landscape had ultimately overpowered them. This discovery left the rescuers deeply shaken as they realized that just a day's journey separated these men from survival. The cruel irony of their fate weighed heavily in the silence, and it was a sobering reminder of how merciless the northern wilderness could be. Chapter 5. Lessons Learned. The story of the Lost Patrol sent shockwaves across Canada, and in the aftermath, the Royal Northwest Mounted Police made crucial changes to prevent future tragedies. For every subsequent patrol, native guides became mandatory, food caches were established along the route, and cabins were built at key points to provide shelter from the elements. This tragedy remains a haunting reminder of the unforgiving nature of the Yukon and the importance of respect for such wild landscapes. The legacy of the Lost Patrol lives on as a lesson in humility and caution, echoing across the icy wilderness where 4 men once walked to the edge of human endurance and beyond. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more perilous quests. Got an epic journey in mind that you think deserves the spotlight? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, Sir Ernest Shackleton, the great Antarctic explorer, said, "Difficulties are just things to overcome, after all."